Hello everyone, you're listening to the St Joan of Arc Biography podcast. I'm your host James Henderson, and I hope you enjoy this journey of the life and times of one of the most famous women in history. Born in 1412 in Domremy in the eastern France, St Joan was one of 5 children and was a peasant most of her life. She never learnt to read or write. During this time in history, France and England had called a truce in the 100-Year War. However, 2 opposing groups were forming within the French royal family. One group was led by Count Bernard VII of Armagnac and Duke Charles of Orleans, and these were known as the Orleanists or the Armagnacs. The other group was led by Duke John the Fearless of Burgundy, and they were known as the Burgundians. Later in history, Duke John's son, Philip III, would be the one to capture Joan and surrender her to the English. Whilst the group within the French royal family were fighting, the English commenced their invasion, led by King Henry V, and defeated the Armagnac army. This happened in August 1415. The English continued their invasion, and in 1417, and with the support of the Burgundians, now led by Philip III, conquered northern France. Philip III would not recognize Charles of Ponthieu, better known as Charles VII, as the rightful heir to the throne of France, but instead agreed to recognize England's King Henry V as the King of France. At the age of around 12, Joan started hearing voices and having visions from Archangel Michael, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine, instructing her to help King Charles VII reclaim and defend France. The visions told her to drive out the English and the Burgundians, and that God supported Charles VII as the true leader of France. It is documented that on at least 2 occasions these visions were witnessed by other people. By 1428, the English had gained much ground and were now focused on the city of Orleans. The situation was looking quite hopeless for Charles VII. After several attempts, Joan was allowed to go speak with Charles, where she correctly predicted that his armies would be defeated by the English and Burgundians in the village of Rouay, a few miles from Orleans. Charles VII was impressed with her predictions and stories of visions, but he wanted to make sure of her intentions, so he sent her off to the theologians for 3 weeks to test her. They gave their approval and claimed that she was another Saint Catherine. Joan then sent a letter to the English commanders with an ultimatum that God had decreed that Charles VII was the rightful king. Dressed in men's battle armor with a banner of Our Saviour, Joan and the army went to Blois, 35 miles from Orleans, where she rallied the troops and instilled new loyalty to Charles VII. The army moved to Orleans, where after several battles they defeated the English, with Joan proudly holding her banner. This was the turning point in stopping the English invasion, and she was now known as the Maid of Orleans. King Charles VII then started to reclaim other occupied cities and towns, with the armies led by Joan with her banner, and the English were further driven back. During these battles, Joan would advise the commanders of battle plans and tactics, which helped the armies secure victories. On July 17th, 1429, Philip VII was crowned King of France, and a truce was declared. The truce only lasted for 15 days, and it allowed the English and the Burgundians time to regroup. Fighting started again, but soon another truce was in place, and this lasted for 4 months. By May 1430, Joan was back in battle after an injury to her thigh, and she had a vision that she would be captured. Her prediction proved to be correct when her army was ambushed by the Burgundian troops in Mont de Claroux, and she was taken prisoner. After 4 months as a prisoner, Joan was sent to England for trial. Historians believe that the trial was heavily weighed against Joan, as the main priority for the English was revenge rather than to prove she was a heretic. Documents state that many of the witnesses received payment for their testimony. Early on in the trial, they even accused her of witchcraft and cross-dressing. In the end, she was convicted of being a heretic and sentenced to death. She was burned at the stake in 1431, when she was only 19. After the English were finally driven out of France in 1449, an appeal for Joan commenced, resulting in the acquittal of charges. The theologians declared Joan to be a martyr. After being proven innocent, St Joan was beatified in 1909 and then canonized in 1920, and is now known as St Joan of Arc. I hope you all enjoyed this podcast on St Joan of Arc and this quick glance into her life. Thanks for listening.